His father had been dead for 11 days when the neighbor called about the truck. Cole had been in the middle of packing the last of the kitchen boxes, canned goods, still in alphabetical order the way his father kept them, when his phone rang and a woman's voice told him there was something moving inside the old Ford in the garage. Low sound, she said, steady, like breathing against metal. Cole set the box down on the kitchen table. He stood there for a moment with his hands still on the cardboard flap. The garage had been locked since the funeral. He had the key. He had looked in on the first morning, seen the truck, and closed the door again. He had told himself he would deal with it before he left. He had not dealt with it. His father had been dead 11 days, and there was something alive in that garage. And Cole was only now standing in the kitchen with a box of canned goods, understanding that his father had put it there on purpose. He went to get the key. What kind of man locks a living thing in a dead man's truck and makes sure there is enough food and water for 2 weeks? Thank you for being here. Please subscribe and like this video. And before we continue, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments. I love knowing who's out there listening. Cole Merritt had driven 7 hours to bury his father and had not expected to stay more than 3 days. He was a man in his early 50s, built tall and lean, with the quiet economic movements of someone who has spent a lifetime working. His brown hair, grown a little too long, was streaked with silver at the temples. His face was weathered and rugged, carved by the sun and by memories that were just as harsh. Yet his eyes held a deep, settled kindness that had survived everything. He pulled on his boots in the dark of the motel room, the leather cracked and dark with use. He shrugged into his old brown leather jacket and left it unzipped, revealing the dark flannel shirt beneath. He had not slept more than 2 hours. He had not expected a home. The funeral had been small, 7 people. Cole had stood at the back because he did not know where else to stand. He had not spoken to his father in 3 years, not since the last phone call that had ended the way all their calls ended. His father saying something short and final, and Cole holding a deadline for 30 seconds before he put it down. Raymond Merritt had lived alone in the same house in Mill Haven, Tennessee for the last decade. The neighbors knew him as a quiet man who kept his yard clean and waved when he drove past. Nobody knew much else. Cole had not known much else either. His father had become a stranger slowly, the way a river changes course, not all at once, but 1 inch at a time, until one day you look up and the water is somewhere you don't recognize. Cole had one brother, Danny, who lived in Phoenix and had sent flowers instead of coming. Their mother had died when Cole was 19. After that, it had always been the 3 of them, Cole, Danny, and their father, pulling in 3 different directions until the rope between them frayed to nothing. The estate was simple: the house, the truck, a savings account with $4,000. Cole was the executor because Danny had asked him to be, and Cole had said yes because he always said yes to things that needed doing. He had spent 2 days going through the house. It was clean, organized, canned goods in alphabetical order. Tools hung on labeled hooks in the workshop. Cole had found nothing personal, no letters, no photographs on the walls. The house had felt like a waiting room. Then the neighbor called. Marge Doyle, 71 years old, with a voice like gravel and a directness that Cole had come to appreciate in the 48 hours since the funeral. She had brought a casserole on the first night and had not lingered. She had not said anything about how sorry she was more than once. Cole respected that. There's something in that truck, she said, no preamble. Been hearing it since yesterday. Low sound, like an animal. Cole set down the box he was carrying. What kind of sound? Breathing, she said, and claws on metal. He had not spoken to his father in 3 years. He had not known his father had a dog. He still did not know why his father had locked it in the truck before he died. He did not know what the white envelope on the dashboard said. He had not opened it yet. He was beginning to understand that he had not known very much at all. The garage smelled of oil and cold concrete. Cole stood in the doorway with a flashlight, the beam cutting across the hood of the old Ford. The truck was a 1994 model, dark green with a crack in the passenger side mirror that had been there since Cole was in high school. His father had never fixed it, had said there was no point fixing something that still worked. Cole stood there for a moment without moving. He listened. From inside the cabin, a sound, low and even, not distress, not panic, something steady and patient, like something that had been waiting a long time and had made peace with waiting. Cole crossed the garage slowly. He put his hand on the door handle. The metal was cold. He pulled it open. Two amber eyes looked up at him from the dark interior of the cab. The dog did not bark. It did not lunge. It sat on the passenger seat with the precise stillness of something that had been placed there deliberately, and it looked at Cole the way a dog looks at a person it has already decided it knows. It was a German Shepherd. Gray and white coat, thick and clean despite 11 days in an enclosed space, large across the shoulders. Its amber eyes were steady and without fear. On the seat beside it, a folded blanket, an empty water bowl, a half-empty bag of kibble, and on the dashboard, anchored under the windshield wiper from the inside, a white envelope with two words on the front written in his father's handwriting. For Cole. Cole stared at it. The dog watched him. It did not move toward the envelope. It did not move at all. It just sat there on the passenger seat of his dead father's truck and looked at Cole as if it had been expecting exactly him on exactly this day at exactly this hour. Cole did not reach for the envelope yet. He stood in the open door of the truck in the Cole garage and understood that his father had not left a dog in a truck by accident. His father had been an engineer for 30 years. Everything in this man's life had a reason. The food and water calculated for 2 weeks. The envelope placed where it could not be missed. Whatever was in that envelope, his father had planned it, had thought about exactly this moment. Cole standing in this doorway, the cold concrete, the amber eyes, and had planned for it. Cole reached for the envelope. The dog moved then. Just once, just slightly. It leaned forward and pressed its nose against Cole's wrist. One brief touch. Then it sat back. Cole's hand stopped. He looked at the dome. The dog looked at him, and then it looked at the windshield. Out through the glass at the garage wall, the way a dog looks when it has somewhere to go and is waiting for you to understand that. The envelope contained one sheet of paper, folded once, written in his father's small, precise handwriting. Cole sat on the running board of the truck with the concrete cold through his jeans and the dog watching him from the passenger seat above, and he read it. Cole. Her name is Scout. She is 7 years old and she knows what she is doing. I need you to trust her the way I trusted her. She knows where. Follow her when she is ready. Do not go looking on your own. She will take you when it is time. I am sorry I did not say this differently. I am sorry I did not say any of it at all. Dad? Cole read it twice, then a third time. He looked up at Scout. She was watching him with that same patient, absolute attention. The kind of attention that does not waver and does not ask for anything back. Where, he said. The word came out rougher than he intended. Scout's ears moved, forward, precise, like two small radar dishes locking onto a signal. Then she looked at the windshield again. Cole stood up. His knee ached the way it always ached in cold weather. An old injury, a bad landing on a jump he should have pulled out of 22 years ago in the Army. He opened the passenger door wider and stepped back. Scout dropped from the seat with a single fluid motion. She landed without sound. She walked to the garage door and sat down and looked back at him over her shoulder. Waiting. Cole spent 2 hours going through the house again before he would follow her. He went through it more carefully this time. He pulled every drawer all the way out. He checked behind shelves. He moved furniture. He found nothing he had not already found. His father had been thorough. Whatever he had wanted Cole to know, it was not in the house. In the workshop, he found one thing he had missed. A calendar on the wall, the kind with a photograph of a different state park each month. Every date had been crossed off with a single diagonal line, right up to the date his father had died. The last cross was on a Wednesday. His father had died on a Thursday. Cole stood in the workshop for a long time looking at that calendar. Scout sat in the doorway the entire time. Not restless, not impatient, just present. Cole took the calendar off the wall. He folded it and put it in his jacket pocket. He did not know exactly why. He just knew he did not want to leave it there for strangers to throw away. He called Danny that evening. Danny picked up on the fourth ring. his voice carrying the background noise of a house with children and a television on in another room. Cole told him about the dog in the envelope. There was a silence on Danny's end that stretched long enough to become its own answer. "Dad had a dog," Danny said finally. "Not a question." 7 years, Cole said. Another silence. "And he wants you to follow it somewhere." "That's what the note says, Cole." Danny's voice had that tone, the one he used when he thought Cole was being credulous. The tone that had always made Cole feel like the younger brother even though he wasn't. "He's gone. Whatever he wanted to show you, he's gone. You don't have to do this. I know I don't have to. Then come home." Cole looked across the kitchen at Scout, who had moved from the doorway to the back door. She was sitting there looking at the tree line beyond the yard. She had been sitting there for the last 20 minutes, still as a stone, ears forward. "I'll call you when I'm done," Cole said. He hung up. He did not sleep well that night. He lay in his father's bed and listened to the house. Scout slept on the floor at the foot of the bed, her breathing slow and even, the deep, uncomplicated breathing of something that has no unresolved questions. At 3 in the morning, Cole got up and made coffee and sat at the kitchen table. Scout lifted her head when he moved, watched him cross the room, put her head back down. The kitchen was the same kitchen he had sat in as a boy. Same table, oak with a burn mark on one corner from 1987, the year Cole started high school. He had been there when it happened. His father had set a pot down without a trivet and said one word under his breath and gone to get the trivet. Cole had traced that burn mark with his finger for years afterward. He traced it now. Then a memory arrived without being invited. The smell of motor oil and coal metal, a socket wrench in the driveway. He was 10 years old. His father's legs sticking out from under this same truck, only new. Cole sitting on the cold concrete holding a flashlight aimed under the chassis. His father's voice from the dark beneath, calm and explanatory, teaching the way he always taught. By narrating, by including Cole in the process rather than handing him the result. "Hold it steady, Cole. Little more to the left. There. You see what that does?" He had not thought about that afternoon in years. He could smell the oil now, the cold concrete under his jeans, his father's boots beside his knee. He was back in the kitchen. Scout shifted at the foot of the stairs. One of her ears twitched at a sound outside, something small in the yard, then settled. Cole watched her do that. He stayed at that table until 5 in the morning. The next day, he followed Scout into the woods. Cole spent that second night trying to sleep and failing at it. He lay in his father's bed with Scout on the floor at the foot of it and listened to the house settle around him the way old houses settle, small sounds that are not alarming once you know them, creaks and ticks that a stranger would mistake for something else. He had grown up in this house. He knew every sound. He had not been in this house in 4 years, and he still knew every sound. And that knowledge sat in him with a particular heaviness he could not put a name to. He got up at 2:30 and stood at the window of the bedroom, looking out at the backyard. The moon was up. The yard was pale and still. Scout was awake. He could hear her breathing change, but she did not get up. She just lay there in the dark and was present the way she was always present, without requiring anything. He had been thinking about the calendar. His father had crossed off every day for as long as the calendar covered. 1 year, 365 small diagonal lines. What does a man count toward when he crosses off each day? Cole had known men in the army who counted days. Everyone counted days in that context. It was normal and expected. It was how you got through. But his father had been home, had been retired for 6 years, had no reason to count days except to remind himself that they were happening, that he was still in them. Cole went back to bed. He lay there until 5. Scout breathed. The house settled. He thought about the note. "I am sorry I did not say this differently. I am sorry I did not say any of it at all." The apology had been short. 1 paragraph, 2 sentences of apology after years of silence. Cole had read enough of his father's writing over the years to know that short was what this man did when something cost him. Long letters meant nothing. Short ones meant everything was on the line. The morning was gray when he finally rose and made coffee. Scout came with him to the kitchen and sat by the back door looking at the tree line with her ears forward. Cole stood at the counter with his mug and watched her. She had been doing this since she arrived, sitting at the back door and looking at the woods with that specific, focused patience, as if she had somewhere to be and was waiting for him to be ready. He was not ready yet. He needed to go through the house one more time. He needed to look at the workshop again. He needed to make sure there was nothing he was missing before he followed a dog into the woods on the instructions of a dead man. This was not how Cole Merritt made decisions. He was a man who verified things. He had spent 20 years in the Army and 12 years in contracting work after that, and in both of those careers, the single most expensive mistake you could make was to proceed on incomplete information. He went through the house again, more slowly this time, looking at everything his father had left behind, not as an estate to be cataloged, but as a life to be read. The workshop told him the most. The tools were arranged by function and then by size within each function, hanging on a pegboard with each outline traced in marker, so the absent tool was as legible as the present one. Cole had watched his father put up that pegboard when Cole was 12 years old. He remembered the level, the measuring tape, the careful spacing. His father had made a thing that would work perfectly and would last. That was what his father built. Things that would last. Scout was at the workshop door the entire time Cole was in there, just watching him. Cole checked every shelf. He opened the drawers of the workbench one by one. In the bottom drawer, he found a tin of old photographs, not framed, not organized, just loose photographs in a tin the size of a shoebox. He sat down on the workshop stool and went through them. They were mostly from his and Danny's childhood. His father younger, much younger, in photographs Cole had never seen. Someone else must have taken them, because this was a man who was always behind the camera, never in front of it. In one photograph, his father was standing at a campfire with a pro who was not Cole and not Danny, a boy Cole did not recognize. They were laughing. His father's face was completely open in a way that Cole had almost never seen his face. Scout padded into the workshop and sat beside the stool. She put her nose briefly against Cole's hand and then looked at the photographs and then looked at Cole. He could not read what she knew. He was not sure he wanted to yet. He had been reading for close to 2 hours by the time he reached the letters from the last year before his father went quiet. Scout was lying fully on her side now, her back warm against his leg, her breathing slow. He had stopped noticing the cold. The letters from that final year were the ones that told him the most about his father and the least about what to do with what he now knew. His father had been happy. That was the central fact, and it was a complicated one. Not happy in a resolved way, not at peace, not content, but alive in a way that the house in Millhaven with its alphabetical canned goods had not suggested. Helen had a particular skill with language that meant the pictures she drew of Cole's father were vivid and specific. Raymond laughing at something on a Tuesday morning over coffee he had not finished. Raymond spending an entire afternoon trying to fix a fence post that ultimately required a professional and refusing to call one until Helen suggested it was possible that the post itself was defective rather than his method. Raymond standing in Helen's kitchen with Scout at his feet, both of them watching Helen cook something, both of them tilting their heads in the same direction at the same angle. He looked like Scout in that moment, Helen had written. Or she looked like him. I'm not sure which way it went. Cole had smiled at that. He had not expected to smile while reading his father's private correspondence in a cold clearing in November with his jeans wet from the ground. He had smiled anyway. There was a letter that mentioned Cole by name again, a different letter, from 2 years later than the one he had already read. His father had apparently told Helen about Cole leaving the Army, about the 2 years after that which had been difficult in ways Cole had not been specific about in the phone calls home. Helen had written, "He worries about you the way a man worries about the one thing he cannot fix. I told him you seemed capable of fixing yourself if given enough room. He said that was exactly what he was afraid of, giving you room when what he wanted to do was show up." Cole read that twice. His father had wanted to show up, had been afraid that showing up was the wrong thing, had given Cole room instead, which was also the wrong thing, or at least was not the thing that was needed. Cole was 49 years old and had spent the last 3 years believing his father's silence was indifference. Scout breathed against his leg. The creek moved. A bird, a woodpecker by the sound, was working at a dead tree somewhere above the clearing. The ordinary world was very ordinary. Cole found a letter written 18 months before his father went quiet in which Helen described a conversation they had apparently had about what happens after. His father had apparently told Helen that he wanted to be cremated and that he wanted his ashes scattered somewhere he had been happy. He had not been specific about where. Helen had pressed him on it, and he had said he would know when the time came. He never told her. Cole thought about that. His father had died without telling Helen where he wanted his ashes scattered, had taken that information with him. The ashes were in an urn on the mantelpiece in the house in Millhaven, the house Cole had just listed for sale. He had not thought about what to do with the ashes beyond moving them from the house before the realtor showed it. He thought about it now. Scout raised her head. She looked at Cole and then at the path back through the trees. Her ears were forward, not urgent. She had never been urgent about anything, had moved through all of this with that same steady patience, but attentive. She was telling him something without telling him anything. He understood her the way he understood, now that you could understand a person through the evidence they left behind, even when the person was no longer there to explain it. His father had been a man who loved quietly and retreated badly and wanted to show up and didn't. He had gotten the last thing right. He had built a way for Cole to find him after he was gone, had placed a bow and an envelope in a buried box at the end of a path through the woods he had walked every morning, and he had trusted Cole to come and to follow. He had been right to trust that. Cole folded the final letter. He put it back. He sat for one more minute with his hand on the closed box. He was not ready to stand up yet. He wanted to be in this clearing for one more minute, where his father had been, where the ground was disturbed and the leaves were cold and the creek made the same sound it had been making for longer than anyone had been alive to hear it. He put the photographs back in the tin and put the tin back in the bottom drawer. He closed the workshop. He stood in the yard in the cold morning air and looked at the gap in the fence. Scout was already there. She sat at the gap and looked back at him. She had been waiting for this all along. The woods behind the property were second-growth Tennessee hardwood, dense and steep in places, with a creek running through the low ground. The morning was cold, frost on the leaves. Cole's breath came out in small, even clouds. Scout moved ahead of him at a pace that was neither hurried nor leisurely, purposeful. She followed a path that Cole could barely see, a faint impression in the dead leaves, the occasional broken branch at knee height. A trail used enough times to leave a trace. They walked for 20 minutes. Then Scout stopped. She stood at the edge of a small clearing where the ground leveled out near the creek bank. She looked at the ground, then at Cole, then at the ground again. Cole crouched. He pressed his hand against the earth. It was solid, but not as solid as the ground 2 feet to either side. Slightly raised, slightly different. Something was buried here. He had not brought a shovel. Scout sat down. She was not going anywhere. Cole went back to the garage for a shovel and came back and dug. It took 40 minutes. Scout sat at the edge of the clearing the entire time, watching. When the shovel hit something solid with a flat metallic sound, she stood up. Cole scraped the dirt back carefully. A metal box emerged. Military surplus, olive drab paint mostly replaced by rust, rubber seal around the lid, 2 latches on the front. He lifted it out. It was heavier than it looked. Scout walked to him and sat beside him. She looked at the box and then at Cole, and then she looked at the creek, the way she sometimes looked at things she had already finished with. Cole set the box on a flat rock. He worked the first latch, then the second. The lid resisted. The seal had done its job for however many years it had been down there. And then it gave. Inside, a layer of oilskin cloth. He peeled it back. Letters. A stack of them, rubber banded together, each in a sealed envelope. The handwriting on the front was not his father's. He turned the top envelope over, read the return address, a name he did not know, Helen Marsh, and a town in North Carolina. He looked at the postmark. The most recent was dated 14 months ago. He counted the stack, then he counted again. He went through them by date, oldest to newest. The oldest postmark went back 9 years. Someone had been writing to his father for 9 years. He opened the most recent letter first. He read the first line. He sat down on the cold ground with the box in his lap and Scout pressing her side against his leg, and he did not move for a long time. The letter began, "Dear Raymond, I know you said I shouldn't write anymore. I'm writing anyway." Her name was Helen Marsh. The letter was 4 pages and Cole read every word. He read the second letter, then the third. Scout sat beside him through all of it, shifting her weight occasionally, once standing to investigate something at the edge of the clearing before returning and pressing against his leg again. Cole barely noticed. He was somewhere else. The picture that assembled itself from those letters was of a man Cole did not entirely recognize. His father had been happy, not simply content, genuinely, unexpectedly happy for the first time in a long time. Helen described him laughing, described a weekend trip they had taken to Gatlinburg where his father had eaten too much fudge at a candy shop and complained about it for 2 days and then admitted it was worth it. Described the way his father talked about Cole, not coldly, not distantly, but with a pride he apparently found difficult to express directly. "He talks about you more than he knows," Helen had written in a letter from 4 years ago. "He doesn't hear himself do it. He'll be telling me something else entirely, and then Cole will appear in the middle of the sentence, the way important things do." Scout put her nose briefly against Cole's knee. He kept reading. They had met at a veteran support group in Nashville in the year after Cole's mother died. His father had driven 40 minutes each way to attend that group for 3 years. Cole had not known. He had thought his father was simply working late on those evenings. They had been together, not married, the letters didn't use that word, but together in every sense that word implies, for 11 years. Helen had moved to North Carolina in 2019. The letters continued across the distance. His father had written back. She referenced his letters constantly, quoted lines from them, but his letters were not in the box. His letters were in North Carolina, in a house Cole had never seen. Cole sat with that for a moment. His father had gone quiet 3 years ago, not just with Cole, with Helen too. She wrote about it with a contained grief that was harder to read than anger would have been. She had driven to Mill Haven once, she said in one letter, had parked outside the house, had sat there for 20 minutes, then had driven away without knocking. Cole understood why without her explaining it. The last letter ended. "I still have Scout's sister. Her name is May. They were from the same litter. If you ever change your mind about thing, Raymond, May and I are still here. We're not going anywhere." Cole folded the letter. He put it back in the envelope. He sat with the open box in his lap and looked at the creek. His father had been alone for the last 3 years by choice, not by circumstance, by choice. He had pulled away from Helen. He had pulled away from Cole and Danny. He had kept the house clean and crossed the days off the calendar one by one and taken care of a dog that connected him to something he had decided he no longer deserved. Cole knew that shape, had been close to wearing it himself for a period after the Army that he did not discuss with anyone. The logic of it was airtight and wrong in the way only certain kinds of logic can be. Internally consistent, externally catastrophic. A man who decides he is too much decides wrong. He is not sparing anyone anything. He is only taking something away. Cole pressed the heel of his hand against his eye for a moment. Scout pressed her whole side against his leg. She was warm. He had not noticed until then how cold he was. He knew the truth now. He understood why his father had built this. The 2 weeks of food, the envelope, the path through the trees worn smooth by morning walks. His father had known Cole would come, had counted on it the way a man counts on the one thing he is still sure of, had built a way for Cole to find what he had kept hidden because he could not find the words to say it alive, but could not bear to let it disappear with him either. That was something. It was not enough. It was something. He found one letter that he read 3 times. It was from 4 years ago, one of the longer ones. And it was about nothing specific. A Tuesday, Helen said, a perfectly ordinary Tuesday in October. But his father had apparently called her that afternoon just to talk, which was unusual enough that she had written about it. He had called from the workshop, She could hear the sounds of it in the background. He had talked for 40 minutes about nothing in particular, about the weather coming in, about a repair he had made to the porch railing that had taken twice as long as it should have because he had approached it wrong the first time and had to undo everything and start over. About a documentary he had watched the night before about migratory birds that had struck him as genuinely interesting. Scout had been in the workshop with him. She could hear the dog's nails on the concrete floor. Helen had written, "I don't know why I'm telling you this. It was just a Tuesday, but I want to remember it." He sounded like himself. He sounded completely like himself, and I want to remember that that is who he was on a Tuesday in October in the workshop with the dog. Cole sat with that for a long time. His father had been himself on a Tuesday in October 4 years ago, had called a woman in North Carolina to talk about nothing in particular, had talked for 40 minutes. Scout had been there. Cole had not known any part of this was happening. He had spoken to his father twice that year, both times briefly, both times with the specific carefulness of two people who have stopped knowing how to be easy with each other. He had not known there were Tuesdays in October. He had not known there was a workshop with a dog in it and a 40-minute phone call about migratory birds. He had not known. He knew now. Scout put her chin on his knee. She had shifted position while he was reading and had not announced it, had simply moved, and now her chin was on his knee and her amber eyes were looking up at him with that expression that was not quite concern and not quite patience, but something that included both. Cole put his hand on her head. She did not move. He sat like that for a while, his hand on the dog's head, the letters in his lap, the creak making its sound. He thought about the calendar on the nail in the workshop. 365 diagonal lines. His father crossing off each day as it happened, making sure it was marked, making sure it counted. He thought about his father calling Helen on a Tuesday about nothing. He thought about the 4 chords on the guitar, but G and C and D and M. What hype the beginners for practiced badly and with great stubbornness for 2 years. He thought about a man who wanted to show up and was afraid to, who loved quietly and retreated badly, who sealed what he could not say into an olive drab box and buried it in the woods and left a dog to show the way. Cole was not angry. He had thought he might be coming into this. Had thought that if there was a reason for the silence, and there clearly was, he might be angry at it. He was not angry. What he felt was something that did not have a clean name, a kind of grief that was also a kind of gratitude. The two things so intertwined, he could not separate them. His father had given him this, had built this whole thing, the food and water in the truck, the envelope, the worn path, the buried box, as a way of saying what he could not say directly. It was the most his father had ever communicated to him. It had taken a dead man in a clearing in the woods in November to get there, but it was the most, and Cole had it now, and he was not going to put it down. Cole read the oldest letters in the stack, working backward through the years. The early ones were more formal, the handwriting of two people still learning each other, still measuring how much could be said and how. By the third year, the formality was gone. Helen wrote the way a person writes to someone they have stopped trying to impress and have started trying simply to reach. She wrote about her son, a man named Kevin, who lived in Raleigh and worked in construction and called on Sundays with the faithful regularity of a man who had been raised to call on Sundays. She wrote about the small rhythms of her town, the neighbor who grew tomatoes that were too good not to mention, the local diner that had changed ownership twice in 5 years and was currently worse than it had been under either previous owner. She wrote about his father the way you write about someone who has become part of the texture of your days, matter-of-factly, with love so embedded it no longer needs to announce itself. Scout shifted position beside Cole. She lay down fully now, her long body stretched along his leg, her head on her paws. The creek moved. The cold was serious now. Cole's fingers were going stiff around the letters, but he did not stop reading. He found a letter from 6 years ago that mentioned a night his father had told Helen about Cole's first deployment. The detail his father had remembered and relayed was specific. Cole had called home from a satellite phone on a Tuesday evening and had been cheerful. had been so determinedly cheerful that his father had known immediately something was wrong and had not said so and had not slept that night. Cole had not known his father had not slept that night. He had been 23 years old and determinedly cheerful on a satellite phone and had not known. He read the line twice. Scout pressed her side more firmly against his leg. He thought she might have felt him go still. There was a letter from 3 years ago, one of the last ones, from the period just before his father went quiet. That was different from the others. His father had said something to Helen that she was responding to, something about not wanting to be a weight on people, and her response was 3 pages of careful, unhurried argument against that idea. She named specific things. She listed concrete examples. She wrote the way someone writes when they have thought for a long time about exactly what the other person needs to hear and have decided to say all of it. At the end of those 3 pages, she wrote, "Raymond, you have never once been a weight on me. You have been the opposite of a weight. I do not know how to make you believe that. I only know it is true." Cole folded that letter slowly. He understood now what had happened to his father in those last 3 years. Not depression exactly, though probably that too, but something more specific. His father had looked at the people he loved and had decided wrongly and completely that they would all be better off if he took up less space. Had begun withdrawing room by room from his own life the way a man closes off the unheated parts of an old house in winter. Scout stood up. She shook herself. She turned and looked at Cole with those amber eyes. She had been patient across 4 hours of sitting in a cold clearing beside a man reading letters. She had not rushed him. She had just been there. He gathered the letters carefully. He put them back in the oilskin in the order he had found them. He put the lid back on the box. He sat for another moment looking at the creek. His father had walked these woods every morning, had come to this clearing probably, had stood on this bank, had been at peace here the way he had apparently not been able to be at peace anywhere that required him to be seen. Cole understood that too. He had lived in enough silence himself to understand the logic of it, the way silence can feel like protection, like decency, like the least you can do for people you love. His father had gotten it wrong. The math was wrong. The answer was wrong. But Cole understood the working. Scout touched her nose to his hand once. Cole stood up. His knees ached from the cold ground. He picked up the box. He picked up the shovel. He looked at the clearing one more time. The creek, the frost on the dead leaves, the place where the earth had been disturbed and was now filled back in. His father had carried this here, had sealed it, had kept it safe for Cole to find. He had not been able to say it while he was alive, but he had made sure it did not disappear with him. That was something. It was not everything. It was not the 3 years of phone calls they had not had, or the visit Cole had told himself he would make and had not made, or the conversation that would have started with, "I don't understand why you've gone quiet," and ended somewhere neither of them had been before. It was not those things, but it was something real, and it was here, and Cole had it now. Scout stood up. She shook herself, nose to tail, and looked at Cole. Cole looked back at her. "He sent you to find me," he said, "and you found me." Scout's tail moved twice. Then she turned toward the trees. Cole called Helen Marsh that afternoon from his father's kitchen. He had found her number at the bottom of the last letter, written there the way you write a number you're not sure will ever be used but cannot bring yourself to leave out. She picked up on the second ring. He told her who he was. There was a silence on her end. Not uncomfortable, not calculating. The silence of a woman absorbing something unexpected and choosing how to hold it. "Cole," she said. Her voice was steady. "Yes, ma'am. He talked about you," she said. "I read that," Cole said. A pause. "I'm sorry about your father. I know you are." He could hear it. The particular quality of grief that belongs to people who are not supposed to be publicly grieving, who don't appear in the obituary, who stand outside the designated circle of loss and hold their grief quietly in both hands. She told him about the day they had found Scout and May from a farm outside Cookville, a litter of 8. His father had not planned to take a dog, had driven out with Helen on what was supposed to be a quick errand. He had held Scout for 4 minutes And that had been the end of the discussion. He said she reminded him of you, Helen said. How so? Cole asked. She said his father had told her Scout was stubborn and watched everything and didn't ask for much, but would follow you anywhere if you gave her a reason. Cole looked at Scout, who was lying under the kitchen table with her head on her paws, watching him. That's a fair description, he said. Helen laughed. It was a real laugh, brief, a little surprised. The laugh of a woman who had not expected to laugh today and was not unhappy about it. Cole stood in his father's kitchen and listened to the afternoon light move across the linoleum floor, and Helen told him about his father the way only someone who knew him in private could. The small, specific things, the way he organized his tools, the way he drank his coffee. The guitar he had been trying to learn for 2 years, badly and with great stubbornness, 4 chords, the beginner's 4, G and C and D and M. Cole had not known any of it. He should have. He understood that now, not as blame exactly, but as simple fact with weight in it. He should have called more. He should have driven down before there was an estate to settle. He had told himself there was time. There is always, right up until there isn't, the comfortable assumption that there is still time. I think he thought he had used up his share, Cole said. Of what? Helen asked. Of asking for things, Cole said. Helen was quiet for a long moment. Then, yes, I think you're right. Before she hung up, she said, he was proud of you. He didn't know how to say it to you directly. But he was. Cole pressed his thumb and finger against his eyes for a moment. He did not speak. Scout shifted under the table. He was proud of you, Helen said again. Not as comfort. As fact, plainly stated, because it was true and because someone needed to say it, and she was the one who could. Cole believed her. He stayed 3 more days. He finished the estate work. He listed the house. He called Danny and told him about Helen and the letters and the guitar and the Gatlinburg trip with the fudge. Danny listened without his usual commentary, which was its own kind of response. He never told us any of that, Danny said finally. No, Cole said, a long pause. Why wouldn't he just... Danny stopped. I don't know, Cole said. I think he got it wrong. They stayed on the line for a while after that without saying much, which was the most they had done in years. On the last morning, Cole went to the workshop before he left. He stood in front of the calendar one more time. He had already taken it. He looked at the nail where it had hung. Then he found the guitar in the corner. Second-hand acoustic, cardboard case, chord chart paper-clipped to the neck. 2 strings slightly out of tune. He held it for a moment. Then he put it back. Some things you leave where they are. He walked to the clearing by the creek one last time. He brought nothing. The box was already in the truck. Scout was in the cab, watching him through the windshield as he crossed the yard and went through the gap in the fence. He stood at the edge of the clearing. The hole he had dug was filled in. The leaves were already settling back over it. He had come to say something, and now that he was here, he had nothing particular to say. His father had stood in these woods, had walked this path with Scout in the mornings. The way you walk with a yegg when you need to be somewhere that isn't the inside of your own head. Had been a person Cole had not fully known and would not now get the chance to know. That was just true. It wasn't a wound exactly, it was a fact with weight that he would carry the way you carry things that can't be set down. Not in your hands, where the weight is obvious, but somewhere lower and deeper, where you only feel it when you turn a certain way. He stood there for 5 minutes, maybe 10, then he walked back. Scout was watching through the windshield when he came out of the tree line. Her ears were forward. Her amber eyes tracked him across the yard and to the truck. He got in. She pressed her nose against his arm once, briefly. He started the engine. He drove north with Scout on the passenger seat. She sat with her head up, watching the road the way a dog watches a road. Not at anything specific. Just present, just watching. The way she watched everything. He had the box in the back. He had a phone number in North Carolina. He had a duel. The hills were brown and gold in the November light. The sky was the color of old pewter. A hawk sat on a fence post and watched them pass without moving. Okay, Cole said. It was the second time that week he had said it without knowing exactly what he meant. Scout's tail moved once. She kept her eyes on the road. He still did not know what his father had been trying to atone for in those last 3 years. He had the letters, but the letters were Helen's side of the conversation. His father's words were somewhere else, written by hand and sent to a house in North Carolina and held there by a woman Cole had spoken to once on a telephone. Maybe he would ask her. Maybe he wouldn't. Some things answer themselves eventually, if you stay present enough to notice. He drove north. Scout watched the road. The hawk was gone from the fence post. The hills kept going. The light was thin and clear and cold. The way November light in Tennessee is honest about what it is and not trying to be more. Cole Merritt drove home with his father's dog, and the highway was the same highway it had always been, and he was not the same man who had driven south on it 7 days ago. That was enough. He never found the letters his father had written back.